Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating role that is practically hidden within the United Nations system. We're looking at the D1 Managing Coordinator for UNCTAD. That's the United Nations Trade and Development Organization. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but trust me, this isn't just your everyday, run-of-the-mill bureaucracy. This is an immensely consequential balancing act sitting right at the dead center of global trade and development initiatives. So let's figure out how a massive international partnership like this actually functions on the ground.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly do you lead a massive global initiative when you don't actually manage the team doing the technical work? If you've ever had to lead a cross-functional project at work without being anyone's direct boss, maybe in a matrix management setup, you know exactly how incredibly tough this is. Solving this puzzle requires a careful mix of intense diplomacy, operational discipline, and a really sophisticated approach to internal management. To really understand this paradox, we first need to define the role itself. The Principal Coordination Officer, which we're just going to call the Managing Coordinator, is a D1 level position. It reports directly to the UNCTAD Deputy Secretary General, and its whole purpose is managing a massive bilateral cooperation partnership with MOFCOM, which is the Ministry of Commerce of China. If we translate that heavy bureaucratic phrasing into plain English, it means you have exactly 1 year, and you are funded entirely by outside money to prove to everyone that this enormous international partnership actually works. The clock is literally ticking from day one. To help us navigate all this, we are going to break down the highly detailed strategic guide for this role into 5 easy-to-digest sections. We'll cover the coordination dilemma, influence without direct authority, strategic alignment for least developed countries, program and budget administration, and finally, measuring long-term impact. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the coordination dilemma. Managing a bilateral program of this immense scale within a rigidly structured global organization requires a non-stop diplomatic balancing act. You are operating in a highly complex environment where even tiny miscommunications can cause huge institutional ripple effects. The coordinator sits dead center of a massively tangled stakeholder web. You've got MOFCOM counterparts in China, the Deputy Secretary General supervising you, the internal UNCTAD substantive divisions doing the actual technical work, regional field offices, a dedicated steering committee, and of course, the ultimate beneficiaries, the least developed countries. You basically have to manage all these external relationships while simultaneously steering the internal UN bureaucracy, keeping everyone totally aligned without stepping on a single toe. Moving right along to Section 2, influence without direct authority. And this brilliantly illustrates the core challenge of the job. I want you to think of the managing coordinator kind of like an orchestra conductor. A conductor doesn't hire the musicians, they don't fire them, and they certainly don't play the instruments for them, right? But they are still fully expected to deliver a flawless symphony. A traditional division director has direct line authority. They control their specific technical work and the staff who execute it. But the managing coordinator? Their mandate relies completely on influence-based coordination to drive cross-cutting alignment. They don't directly control the technical work of UNCTAD's divisions. So success hinges entirely on relationship building, crystal clear communication, and the power of pure influence rather than just bossing people around. To actually pull this off, they use a remarkably systematic toolkit. The 50 strategic points of the Coordinator's Guide are rigorously scaffolded across 10 key analytical dimensions. For example, you have rationale and alignment, which ties everyday actions directly to UNCTAD and MOVCOM goals. Then you have resources and risk, which deals with managing budgets and navigating really sensitive political terrain. This framework gives the coordinator the ultimate toolkit to synthesize massive amounts of data from diverse stakeholders. It ensures they can navigate both headquarters and field offices with absolute precision. That brings us to Section 3, Strategic Alignment for LDCs. Now, what's really interesting here is that all this high-level coordination has a very specific strategic North Star. The entire purpose of the partnership is to make absolutely sure these massive initiatives genuinely serve least developed countries, or LDCs, and the world's most vulnerable groups. The mandate here is crystal clear. The priority is embedding this LDC focus right into the very DNA of project design and resource allocation. It prevents this overarching goal from just being some disconnected feel-good aspiration, or worse, a vanity project that looks great on paper but does absolutely nothing in reality. It forces the partnership to deliver real, tangible trade and development outcomes exactly where they are needed most. Let's see how this builds into a highly actionable, phased work plan for almost every single initiative. Step 1 is initial scoping and identifying gaps. Step 2 is drafting an informal technical consultation to really build that essential buy-in.
Step 3 is a formal review by senior management. And finally, Step 4 is dissemination and implementation support. By following these methodical steps, the coordinator generates actual, tangible, bureaucratic momentum and ensures that new practices don't just sit collecting dust on a shelf, but are genuinely adopted by field offices and headquarters staff alike.
Let's transition over to Section 4, Program and Budget Administration.
At the end of the day, you have to translate all that high-minded diplomacy and strategic alignment into harsh budgetary reality. These administrative priorities are the actual engine keeping this entire role running. The coordinator is constantly supporting the Deputy Secretary General on proposal reviews, preparing incredibly detailed budgets, and delivering results-based reporting. They're jumping into staff performance evaluations, candidate interviews, and mitigating legal, compliance, and reputational risks. They're even deploying cloud-based digital collaboration tools to bridge the gap between different duty stations. Honestly, just thinking about the sheer volume of UN paperwork and process involved here, you've got to imagine the primary fuel for this role is just an endless, industrial-sized supply of coffee. But jokes aside, this engine requires absolute administrative discipline. You are constantly balancing staff time across competing priorities while proving strict accountability and value for money to governing bodies and donors.
And finally, Section 5, Measuring Long-Term Impact. So how exactly do you leave a legacy when your time is so limited? How does a one-year extra budgetary appointment act as a blueprint for permanent institutional resilience? Well, success isn't just about publishing a fancy policy document. It is about securing early, highly visible wins and driving continuous improvement over the very brief lifespan of the role. For instance, in month 1, you need to establish structured risk registers. Fast forward to 6 months, and you're launching pilot digital collaboration tools to speed up communication. By 9 months, you're conducting after-action reviews to figure out what actually worked. And by the 1-year mark, you need to deliver measurable outcomes, like a very noticeable reduction in administrative disputes. You basically have to prove your value incredibly quickly so that the systems you build survive long after your tenure is over.
So the crucial point here is that the ultimate test of impact isn't a final report. It is when staff and offices actively resist reverting to the previous way of working. Think about that for a second. Embedding this level of preference into a massive organization is incredibly difficult to achieve, but it's the absolute clearest sign of durable institutional change. You want people to take all these resulting improvements completely for granted, viewing them simply as the normal way the organization operates now. Which leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to wrap up this explainer. In a world full of rigid bureaucratic silos and tightly guarded domains, is influence ultimately more powerful than direct authority? This role makes an incredibly compelling case that it just might be. It's a true testament to the hidden mechanics of high-level diplomatic leadership. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpacked the sheer weight and complexity of this managing coordinator position. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.